Is this the start of us finally getting some clarity on this situation and a potential solution to it? Or is this a big mistake that just seems like another step along the path to covering up potential wrongdoing? We're of course talking about the big announcement that came out late last night when the Canadian government went out and did a press conference at around 7 or 8 p.m., something they usually don't do, and said, hey, we are finally going to start taking seriously all of the allegations of election interference. But some will say because of one big mistake in what the government said here that all of this is for nothing and the things that they're trying to do to solve this situation actually aren't good enough. Let me show you a clip from this press conference and we're going to get into more detail here and explain what's really going on.
In the last couple of weeks, Canadians have been hearing and reading a lot about the issue of attempted foreign interference, particularly from China, in our elections. This is not and should never be a partisan issue. But today, I'm announcing that I will be appointing an independent special rapporteur who will have a wide mandate and make expert recommendations on combating interference and strengthening our democracy.
Okay. So he's saying he'll have a special rapporteur who's going to look at election interference and what's gone on here that he's going to be appointing. Right off the bat, I think a lot of people are going to be frustrated that he's the one appointing it and it's not a bipartisan sort of panel of folks choosing someone to look more deeply into this. Let's keep going and I'll give my take. Wow.
This impartial, respected person will ensure transparency and also protection of our institutions, members of our intelligence agencies, and all Canadians.
So Trudeau says that he's going to appoint a special rapporteur to take a look at this situation and decide whether or not we actually do need a public inquiry. But why don't we just actually go straight into it and do the public inquiry? This is what the Proc committee at the House of Commons has said that they want to do. Every single member of that committee, except for the Liberal ones, 5 Liberal ones versus the 6 other political parties, those 6 members of other political parties have said, we want a public inquiry, hard stop.
Now, some people have argued strongly that a public inquiry is the necessary next step. Some others have pointed out the flaws and challenges of a public inquiry. That's why we will ask the independent special rapporteur, as one of the first tasks of their mandate, to provide the government with a recommendation as to what the appropriate next step should be, whether it be an inquiry, an investigation, or a judicial review, and what the scope of that work may be.
He's saying that if this person that we appoint says that we then need to do a public inquiry or a judicial review or some sort of other action, we will listen to them and we will do that, but we won't sort of take the pressure from the other political parties who are calling for a public inquiry. Now, there are points on both sides here, right? The public inquiry might be better for Canadians to actually have trust in the electoral institutions, because that's a super important thing, that we continue to trust our elections and have faith that they are held free and fair. That's important, and a public inquiry could help with that. But on the other hand, a public inquiry, we wouldn't get the documents that we might expect to get because of national security reasons, or for national security reasons, right? A public inquiry, it gets us no more information than we're already getting in the committees, apart from, I will say this, apart from the fact that it wouldn't be partisan, right? We wouldn't have the bickering back and forth. That's what we've got in the committees. That's what we've got between the Conservatives and the Liberals especially, bickering back and forth, making this a you are worse, no you are worse, like pissing match, right? That's what's happening in committees. A public inquiry would mean that there's not that kind of a partisanship. Now, but like I said, a public inquiry, we wouldn't get any more documents than we can already get in the committee meetings, and it would be rather expensive. So there are points on both sides here. So we understand that this rapporteur could call for an inquiry in the future, but why even take that step when the Proc committee has already called for a public inquiry? Well, here's what Trudeau has to say, and there is some merit here. Take a listen and then I'll give you more of my thoughts.
And a number of people have been calling for a public inquiry. That includes the opposition and many other eminent Canadians. Can you explain why you need a special rapporteur to make that decision for you?
We've seen a level of partisanship around this question that, for me, requires us to take a step back, to examine the landscape of everything that we have to fight against interference and give confidence to Canadians, make recommendations on how it must be optimized to deliver that confidence to Canadians, and what If necessary, we should be doing more, whether it be a formal inquiry, a commission, an examination, a panel of retired judges, a judicial review, or what have you. Making sure that that process, whatever process is necessary, is unimpeachable from the very beginning, is going to be part of reassuring Canadians that election integrity and foreign interference is something that, as a country, we are taking with the appropriate level of seriousness and rigor.
Why do we even need a special rapporteur to decide whether or not we need a public inquiry into this issue? Can't we just sort of decide that ourselves amongst the political parties? And so this is sort of what he points to, and he says, also, it's very important to consider for this type of inquiry, if we go the route of an inquiry, we need to, it's not clear what the scope of this inquiry would be. Would it be just about China? Would it be about every single possible country that has ever tried to interfere in Canada? We don't know what the scope of the inquiry should be, and he's saying that in committee things have gotten pretty partisan, and we've watched them here live on the channel too, right? Like, I've watched even more than what's on the channel because I like to watch it at 3x speed to get through it all quickly. So you can sort of see a point here that somebody independent needs to make the decision on what we do here, but again, it won't be enough for people because Trudeau, it seems, is the one that's going to appoint this nonpartisan person. So some of these thoughts are reasonable. It's important that we have an independent look at these things that are causing Canadians to question our major societal institutions like elections, amongst other things. This is more of a global theme in Canadians lacking trust in their institutions with what the Bank of Canada has been doing, but that's a rant for another day and another video. But Trudeau, in my opinion, made one really large gaping mistake here, one that will ruin all of this for him, because even if all of the statements that he made here were absolutely true and were really well-intentioned, trying to get down to the root of why there is this interference and try to shed light on it, even if those were his intentions, which some folks will debate, you could ask a fourth grader why there's a big issue here. If he's the one in appointing the person who's going to decide whether or not there is a public inquiry, and he could potentially be implicated negatively in this public inquiry, well, then folks would say that based on the incentives that he has, that he would sort of appoint someone who's likely not to call a public inquiry if that could potentially get him into trouble. And again, even if every little thing that he said here was accurate and was well-intentioned, trying to get to the root of this whole issue, he just provided a major lane for all of his political opponents to attack, just like Pierre Poilievre does. Let me show you a clip from his response that happened just this morning after the stream of that announcement last night.
He's trying to cover it up again with a secret process that he controls. We want the opposite. He wants a secret process. We want an open process. He wants to control it. We want it to be independent from him. And oh, by the way, he's going to appoint a special rapporteur, which of course will be another establishment liberal appointed by him that will come out and say everything is fine, let's just close the book and move on and let the dictatorship in Beijing once again interfere to help Justin Trudeau get re-elected. Conservatives want exactly the opposite of closed and controlled. We want open and independent. An open, independent, public inquiry to get to the truth and make sure it never happens again. We need to bring home control of our democracy.
And it's not just Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives that are against what Trudeau has done. Of course, they would be typically, right, trying to sort of gain voter support and make the Prime Minister look bad. That's what some folks who say that the Conservatives are more partisan would say. But it's not just the Conservatives here. It's the NDP as well, calling for Trudeau to do more here, to call a public inquiry. Here's what the NDP had to say.
Today, we're going to be asking questions around the serious allegations of foreign interference. We demanded a public inquiry and put that forward in committee, and it was voted on. It's clear that that's what parliamentarians want. It's what Canadians want. And really, we want two criteria to be satisfied. We want to see a process that's independent and that's public or transparent. Those are really the two important things that we believe will restore confidence in our electoral system. And we'll be asking questions about that today.
So Singh also isn't happy with the way that Trudeau's handling this situation, although his stance is a little bit different from Pierre Poilievre's. You see, Jagmeet Singh has two criteria that he wants to be filled to sort of put the NDP party at ease with this issue. He wants an inquiry that is both public and independent. Right now, Singh says that, yes, okay, there is reason to believe that this rapporteur could be independent. He's saying he's withholding judgment on who this person will be until the Prime Minister determines who it's going to be, and then he'll determine whether or not that person is independent enough for his liking. The second criteria, though, hasn't been met in Jagmeet Singh's eyes. He's saying that this is not public enough because this special rapporteur could just make recommendations in private and not actually provide Canadians with any reassurance that they're taking this seriously and that in future elections there won't be interference like this. Again, it just blows my mind that the Liberal Party didn't see this landmine that they were stepping on by saying that they would be the ones to appoint the person who's going to look into this. I feel like it would be so simple to perhaps put together a panel of perhaps the leaders of each political party that's represented in the House of Commons and have to collectively, as a unit, come to terms with one person that you sort of collectively vote on as being the special rapporteur. That would be truly nonpartisan. That would be truly independent. But I just don't understand why they didn't do something like that, and instead now all of this work that Trudeau says that they're doing is going to have a big question mark on it because he's the one placing the person into this role of special rapporteur. Man, I don't think I can say rapporteur anymore. You're just trying to sound fancy for the sake of sounding fancy. But there's one element here that we haven't touched on, and it's a really important element, and it's how much power the NDP have right now for one independent reason, or one specific reason, and that is the fact that they currently have a supply and confidence agreement with the Liberal Party. Now, if you're not familiar with what a supply and confidence agreement is, it's essentially one political party, the NDP, saying to the Liberals, hey, we won't vote in a way that could trigger an election as long as you do these sets of things that we want you to do. Things like starting dental care. That's one of the big things that Singh has been pushing for. Making progress on housing, another one of the big things that the NDP has been pushing for. And they're saying, as long as you do these things, Liberal government, we won't vote for an election to happen. Now, they can withdraw that support that's included in that supply and confidence agreement at any time and trigger an election. And the NDP, if they're not satisfied with what the Prime Minister is doing here, and they really truly do want a public inquiry, then they could withdraw their support, which is something the Liberals certainly don't want right now.
What happens if they're not met? When you get to the end of this process, you don't like the fact that they are not doing a public inquiry, the special rapporteur, would you withdraw your support?
That's not a decision we're making today, and we'll assess the information that comes before us, and we'll let you know once we see the next steps in terms of if they're satisfactory or not. But right now, we're saying very clearly that the independence seems to be met with this idea of a special rapporteur, but we're still concerned about the public element of it. Canadians need to know that everything is being done to protect our democracy, and right now we're concerned about that.
So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP won't confirm whether or not they would withdraw their support of the Liberal government if they don't get a full public inquiry. They're kind of okay with the whole special rapporteur thing. Oh man, I just said it again. They're okay with the special rapporteur thing, but they want something public, but they're not making clear whether or not if there isn't something public, whether they'd withdraw their support. So that's rather interesting, and it kind of makes sense from a political move for the NDP. They likely don't want an election right now. Their polling isn't as high as they would like it to be before an election comes in. They probably wouldn't gain a lot of seats, so it's unlikely that they want to sort of stop supporting the government at this point in time, but they haven't taken it off the table. So it's really going to be interesting to watch here over the next couple of weeks as we see who this special rapporteur is. I said it again, who this special rapporteur is, and whether or not the NDP think that it's satisfactory. So if you haven't already done so, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, because things are telling me that this story isn't going to end here, and it'll let you know whenever there's new updates here right on the channel if you hit those buttons. Greatly appreciated. But with all of that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. Really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.